Bienvenue, welcome. Thank you everyone for coming to the 74th event of Disrupting Disruptions, the feminist and accessible publishing, communications, and technology speaker and workshop series. I'm Dr. Alex Ketchum, and I'm a professor of feminist and social justice studies at McGill and the organizer of this series. The Feminist and Accessible Publishing, Communications, and Technology Speaker and Workshop series seeks to bring together scholars, creators, and people in industry working at the intersections of digital humanities, computer science, feminist studies, disability studies, communication studies, LGBTQ studies, history, and critical race theory. I'm so excited to welcome you all. We have more upcoming events this semester. Next week, Dr. Ababa Birhani will be speaking about AI ethics. Then the next events are with Dr. Hannah Zevin and Dr. Marika Sefor. Keep checking back on our website or follow us on Eventbrite, Facebook, or Twitter for more updates. You can find our full schedule as well as video recordings of our past events at disruptingdisruptions.com. So that's the redirect URL, disruptingdisruptions.com. The other URL is way too long to remember. You can also find our list of sponsors, including Shirk, Milieu, Mila, Riketh, and more. So for tonight, we have a Q&A option available. So throughout the event, you may type your questions in the question and answer box. There will be some time during the second part of the event for Indee Mitchell to answer them. We can't guarantee that every question will be answered, but we are grateful for the discussion that you generate. Thank you to our captioner for today, Brooke. As we welcome you into our homes and our offices through Zoom, and you welcome us into yours, let us be mindful of space and place. As many of you know, past series speakers Suzanne Kite and Jess McLean have pointed to the physical and material impacts of the digital world. While many of the events this semester are virtual or hybrid, everything that we do is tied to the land and the space that we are on. We must always be mindful of the lands that the servers enabling our virtual events are on. Furthermore, as this series seeks to draw attention to power relations that have been invisibilized, it's important to acknowledge Canada's long colonial history and current political practices. This series is affiliated with the Institute for Gender, Sexuality, and Feminist Studies of McGill University. McGill University is located in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, on unceded Kanien'kehá:ka territory. Furthermore, the ongoing organizing efforts by Indigenous communities, water protectors, and people involved in land-back movements make clear the ever-present and ongoing colonial violence in Canada. Interwoven with this history of colonization is one of enslavement and racism. This university's namesake, James McGill, enslaved Black and Indigenous peoples. It was in part from the money he acquired through these violent acts that McGill University was founded. These histories are here with us in this space and inform the conversations we have today. I encourage you to learn more about the lands that you are on. Nativeland.ca is a fantastic resource for beginning. Now for today's event. Indee Mitchell is a New Orleans-based performance artist, cultural organizer, and queer Black feminist interested in creating experimental and community-centered work rooted in collective liberation and healing. Heavily influenced by Black DIY alternative cultures and a radical politic of resistance, Indee has traveled and performed original work around the U.S., slowly planting seeds with many BIPOC, trans, and queer communities, rural and urban alike. Indee has been living in New Orleans since 2013, where he is currently a director of Last Call and Loud, New Orleans Black Queer Youth Theater Ensemble. As a community-taught archivist and TGNC, so trans and gender nonconforming youth advocate, Indee believes in the power and importance of looking back at history to create a more just future moving forward. I'll also add that Indee went to Wesleyan University for undergrad, where we first met. So I'm so excited for tonight's event. Please join me in welcoming Indee. Thanks, Indee, for being here.
Thank you, Alex, for having me. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Before I even get started, I just want to take a second to ground us. And I like to do like simple grounding things before I do anything that I do, mostly because life is lifing all the time and things are hectic. And so it feels really important to just like acknowledge the land that we're on and where we're at, and also have a time and space to just like take a breath. So I like to do this thing called we just do three breaths together. One breath for the past and all the brilliance that has happened, one breath for this current moment that we're in, and then a breath for the future and all the brilliance that will come. So if you're willing and able, just take a second and let's breathe. So let's take a deep breath in. For our first breath, inhale for the past and exhale. We'll take our second breath for the present. Let's take a deep breath in and exhale. And one last final breath for the future. Let's take a deep breath in and hold it and exhale. Thank you for breathing with me as we transition into this virtual space. I'm so excited to be here. So my name is Indee. My pronouns are they and he, and I'm one of the co-directors of Last Call. As Alex mentioned, I also help run Loud, which is a queer youth theater company in New Orleans as well. I love to shout them out in the beginnings of all the things because that work is very important to me and has basically shepherded me through my youth as well. And yeah, we're coming out of a production for them. So I don't know, if y'all want to ask a question about Loud at some point, you can, but primarily I'm going to be focusing on Last Call in this little talk. So I am one of two co-directors of Last Call. It's important for me to shout out my co-director in this moment too, because usually we do things in pairs. That's kind of one of our core values, is to always try to show up in pairs or with the crew when we can. And yeah, and in this moment, I don't know, we're shifting and learning and growing. And here I am talking about the things by myself. And also, here I am with my computer kind of freezing and not letting me go to my next slide. One second. Curse with me, do all the things, it's fine.
Do you want to end the screen share and then restart the screen share? Maybe that'll work.
I'm just looking for things. Okay. There she is. So yeah, this is the core team right now. It's me on the left and my partner in crime, Natalie Nia Falk. And we've been affiliated with Last Call rather for some years. Not quite the founding, we're like the second generation of leadership for the org. So Last Call, we're a oral history project. We're a collective of artists, we're community archivists. And yeah, we use oral history as seeds to make things, to make theater, to make podcasts, to make opportunities for people to be in community with each other. Yeah, we started in 2012 after the last lesbian bar in New Orleans closed, Ruby Fruit Jungle. And yeah, some queers came together and like, well, there's no more lesbian bars. Like, what happened to the lesbian bars? And they started to ask some elders about it. And yeah, lo and behold, we were kind of doing interviews and doing oral history before we really knew that that was a thing that we were doing. And because again, these queers who are asking these questions happen to have been theater makers as well, we saw this as a great opportunity to try something, to make something, to share back with our community. So we have four main components, which is our digital archive, which right now I think we have close to, we might be pushing the 100 mark now of full length interviews and transcriptions. We also have a podcast series. There's 2 seasons currently out and available for people to check out if you're interested. And in this next year, we plan to be releasing 2 more seasons. Season 3 is actually like on the cusp. I think in like the next few weeks, it'll be released. And season 4 is in the process of being made as well. And then our third major component is live performance. As you said, we started by a group of theater makers and continue to see live performance and art as a major component of like why we do the things that we do, because it feels like a special opportunity to share back this history with our community in a new or different, interesting way. And then the final big component are community events, whether it be um, drag shows or the glorious sharings, just like gatherings of people to share the work that they're doing, things that they're seeding. We've done different types of like story events as well. We're just really here to, yeah, hold space for people and that center around both history and art. Yes, for the fun. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about Last Call's oral history practice because I think it's very unique in form. So it's a participatory thing, meaning that like I think what makes us really, really different is that are firmly working against this idea of like extracting histories or extracting stories from communities. We're working to like use this opportunity of of conducting an oral history interview as a way to build community and to like foster new connections with folks. And some of the ways that we do that is through, yeah, we're just like constantly checking in with our interviewees. They become kind of like our advisory board in ways for the organization. So as we continue to like create with these interviews, we make sure to just check in with them and like they get to get the previews of the things and listen to the audios or to the podcast first or see snippets or read snippets of the plays that we create and scenes and things. We try to get their permission and their approval every step along the way if we're like incorporating bits of their story into work that's being shared out publicly. Another really unique component about our oral history practice is that, yeah, like I said, we were doing this thing before we knew that we were doing this thing. So we've collectively created this practice that we are formalizing. And yeah, and it has come with lots of help and guidance from different community members. It's been very intentional about like learning from other folks in our community, and then also passing that on to other folks in our community. I think that's one of the final things that's mentioned here, that makes our oral history practice unique, is that we see this as like a tangible skill to pass on to folks, whether it be the interview conducting, the audio editing process, or the theater making, art making. These all feel like important ways that we can be developing and offerings for our community members. And I guess the last thing to mention about the oral history practice is just acknowledging that there's been shifts in like who and how and what's being focused on. So we started as the Dyke Bar History Project, and as our organization continued to grow and to recenter like who was doing the work and what research we wanted to do, now we're focusing more, like at first we shifted to more to political organizing efforts that were happening in the South. And then our final pivot, or not final, but our newest pivot rather, has been focused on Black, trans, and gender nonconforming stories of love and joy in New Orleans and other places in Louisiana. And all that's based off of, again, like who's at the center. And we hope that like whoever continues this work beyond me and Natalie, that they empower themselves to continue shifting as well. So I feel like I've talked a little bit about the origins of Last Call. I like to show these pictures. This is Alda Talley here on the left, who was one of our biggest supporters and one of our first interviewers, one of the first people who like pushed us and told us to keep interviewing and to like do the thing. And she introduced us to all of her friends. And from there, we kept finding more and more people to interview and talk to. And to this day, we continue to be in deep relationship and community with Alda. Her and her wife live a few hours east of us, or west east of us. And yeah, and we get to hopefully see them soon. It has been like some years now. Pandemic has like impacted everyone. But yeah, so the story of Last Call is that, yeah, we started with Dyke Bars. We did all these interviews, and the first story or the first like iteration of like work that we made, that's kind of what this little video or this picture, this is me with no hair, down here in the middle. We did this show called like the Coming Out Stories, and it was like this really like beautiful multimedia, like there's like some shadows, and like someone was doing like all types of like things on like projection work and stuff. And the main feedback we got from our elders in the moment was, y'all, that was sad and heavy, and like we had fun. Like, yes, there were sad things, and there was so much joy and so much fun and excitement and good things that happen in these spaces. And so we went back to the drawing board and played around in the room a little bit more, and then came up with the show called Alleged Lesbian Activities. We made a musical, actually. Um, and that's very exciting because I always thought I'd be in a musical, and I never knew that it would be a musical about lesbian bars. But that's what we did. We made this beautiful musical about lesbian bars disappearing, and we incorporated different pieces of people's interviews into the audio. So there were like moments of like like flashing back in time and space. And we set the space up to be a bar. Like the whole point was to have another pop-up lesbian bar. So Alleged Lesbian Activities, actually, like we were lucky enough to receive some support from the New England Foundation of Arts to tour the work and to redevelop the work. And had this really interesting tour model where we would go into these different cities beforehand, before we bring the full show, to do interviews with folks to talk about what the lesbian bar scene was like there, and see who the community was there. Because again, the work seems like the show is really important, yes, and it's really fun and great, yes. And one of the most the biggest nugget that came out of doing this work is actually the community connections and the community bonds that were formed between like us, the performers and the creators, and the interviewees, that again, like I said, have like continued to stand through time. Like I'm still connected to with these folks, and we started working on this project in 2012. So it's been many, many, many years now. And so we thought that that would be an interesting model to take on the road. And we got a chance to take the show to Boston, and I was able to like meet and interview some folks out there. Yeah, and like check out the scene there. And we did our show at a bar out in Boston at Jock's Cabaret, actually, which is one of the oldest drag bars in Boston. So it felt like this really beautiful historic moment, like synergy moment to like bring this story about the past to this like very historical space. And yeah, and it was a good time, and community was had, and fellowship was had, and many other tour spots were planned. And then COVID happened. And so we had to pause this work and take care of ourselves and our people. And yeah, and we're in the process of picking this back up. Even though the original ensemble, we're kind of like in many different places in the world, but we're figuring out what's next with it. And so while this was on pause, the beautiful thing that came out of that moment to pause for Last Call was actually our creative fellowship. But I guess first, okay, let me go with the slides, Indy. So, okay, so as I said, I think one of the biggest, we find that like the biggest like learning lesson, like what did we learn in all this work that we've done in making Alleged Lesbian Activities, from the interviews down to the actual performances. And the biggest thing that came out of it was actually just being able to have space that people can gather and build community. And so we have continued to do that throughout this process. These are some of the pictures of some gatherings that we've had over the years. We've continued to like figure out ways that we can mobilize our community, the people that we've met and that we've built community with. Like, again, this is Alda and Mary with me and Natalie and another like Last Call affiliate, Aaron. Just yeah, and we would like go and help them weed their yards sometimes and like spend days with them, hanging out with them, helping them to just like keep up with like their house in ways that they're no longer able to. A lot of the folks that we have interviewed, some of them are without children, some of them yeah, and then people are like transitioning and stuff, so we try really hard to figure out ways that we can continue to support our folks. During the pandemic we had like a little grocery train going around. We've like helped to support finding like healthcare support folks for folks. Like we helped to get a nurse or in-home nurse for some folks and stuff. And we also are like work figuring out how do we mobilize like our younger community to stand up for our trans youth as well. So the picture for this to the right here is from I think 2021, and we participated in a Southern movement activity assemblies rather. They had a national or regional call in the South to mobilize their community, and we did a banner drop, and this was us doing the banner drop and activating an altar at the spot of one of the first Black lesbian bars in New Orleans. So the community aspect is like I am a theater maker and I love making theater. And I also see this as like a major way to like enhance and improve and better my community and keep us connected and deeper in new ways. And yeah, which brings me to community development initiatives. So after we did alleged lesbian activities, we were like, we want to keep working, we want to keep offering these things. And so we did a series of workshops for the community where we offered up some oral history, like theory and like tactics and like skills on like how to interview people and like send folks out into the community to do the interviews. And then we had another workshop around audio editing and podcasting. So folks received the interview and were able to like turn those into mini podcast episodes. And then we had a final third intensive around like just making these things into some sort of like creative thing, and had a show or sharing play planned for that day and definitely got derailed by some weather. So but the things happened and it was beautiful. It also helped to plant the seeds for our newest initiative that we're working on right now and our newest bit of research, which is the Creative Fellowship. So this is, you know, 5 of the 6 beautiful Black trans artists that we have the privilege of working with right now. We're kind of more than midway through of the fellowship now, have done our oral history and podcasting intensive. Folks are making their podcast and we're getting ready to do our 3rd creative intensive that'll have sharing for our community at the end. And so, yeah, it was really an intentional choice as me and Natalie took over leadership in Last Call to like find a way to focus specifically on Black trans community here in New Orleans and offering up these skills and offering up this platform to create something and make something and share something together. And yeah, and I'm super excited. And the fellowship has lots of different components to it. We meet monthly and we have these 3 different intensives, and there's also 2 major learning exchanges that we do with other folks in our community. So again, that folks aren't just learning like how to make art and like how to make podcasts, but we're also intentionally placing different folks in our community to like in the center of the work as well, so that we can be like making connections and people can be finding other pathways to their creative endeavors in the future. And I think that might be it. Yeah, if y'all have more information on Last Call, can be like found on our website, which is lastcallnola.org. We have a Facebook and an Instagram. You can find our podcast there too. I feel like I talked a lot about Last Call. I'm really excited and honored about to be shepherding this work, because it really is a labor of love. And a way to strengthen the community connections that both I have and that we're building together. So yeah, I think we can open her up for questions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Indee. That was great. So I want to remind folks you can ask questions in the Q&A box below, and Sarah and I will go back and forth reading them. We'll just read your first name aloud, or you can say if you want it to be anonymous. But we want to invite you into the conversation. Maybe I'll get us started with a question, something that you've talked about in the past, but maybe people attending might be interested in, which is, are the interviews available on your website, or who are they available to? And what are your plans for preserving the interviews?
Yes, this is such a great question and an ongoing conversation with our collective. Because as of now, the interviews are not public. We have a private hard drive that we have all the things and share all the things with. We like intentionally haven't released them to any sort of like public institution in this moment quite yet. One, because we know, I don't know, we know that there's different politics around that, you know? So it's like, do you go like public versus private versus community, you know what I mean? And like the different perks that and benefits that come with like private institutions, like they have funds and like, you know, they'll be secure versus community. Like I know some community archives are like literal closets in like someone's house. But you know, that community feels like more in alignment with how we work. And for me, it feels really important that like people, that anyone can access these things and that it's not restricted to like, oh, you have to be a student of this institution or you have to like, I don't know, be an affiliate of this organization or whatever. So I don't know. So we're still in conversation about that. And one of the creative solutions of like how, and also in one of the ways that we continue to like put the stories out there is through our podcast. And it's why we keep pumping that out, because it's a way that people can still access and hear the stories if you like can't be at whatever the shows that we have are. And then we also have like had listening parties in the past too. That's kind of been, it's actually part of like our creative process as well, like to generate different ideas and like different excitement for folks and even possibly find new folks to interview. Like that was one of the things that I would do, that I did in Boston, when we would go in and try to find folks to interview, because I'm some random person that they don't know. So and, you know, and I find that like once you find that one person, then the like floodgates open up and you're like, oh, okay, here are all the connections. And it took us a second to find that. And one of the ways we did was by having a listening party where we would listen to parts of the different interviews and have folks do story circles or like share different stories that they remember from different bars and stuff. But yeah, so long story, a long way of saying like, no, it's not public. But if people are interested in accessing them, we do consider, you know, case by case, like if we can release things to people. And you can contact us via email.
Amazing. I'm still going to encourage people, please type questions in. Indee is so fantastic and such an amazing resource. So please send in questions. While we're waiting for folks to ask questions, and I know people do have questions, perhaps you can talk a little bit about kind of the process of selecting the questions that you all asked interviewees. Was it something that folks in the collective kind of came up with an initial list and then like asked them, or was it creating the list with the elders and kind of workshopping it? Is it more conversational and kind of just goes with the flow? How basically, can you speak to that process?
Yes, for sure, for sure. So generally speaking, the collective generates a list of questions, and like a huge list of questions. We have like a question mapping activity that we do that helps us to like just get all the things out there around a different, whatever the topic is or the theme or point of research is. And then from there, it's up to the interviewee to kind of like curate how they think the interview will go. And yeah, the goal is for it to be more conversational, or for me, my goal is always to like for it to be or like less conversational and more like I want to hear people's stories. And sometimes different people need different questions to like tap into those memories. And sometimes you're just like ask a person their name and they like go for an hour and you're like, perfect. I have more than what I need, like 2 hours of content to sift through at this point. So I like to have extra questions on hand and kind of like grouped by theme so that, you know, depending on who the person is, like you can flow with them. And if they need some more, a little like prying or follow-up questions, you kind of like prepped with them and stuff. But that's my approach to interviewing. I know some folks who prefer to have like it's 6 questions, they answer the 6 questions, and that is the interview. And I think that that's fine too. Because again, yeah, I think I find that so much beauty comes out of like giving anyone a platform to like tell their story. Yeah, especially when asking about like the specific like content that we're asking about, like we're asking specifically about like joy, we're asking specifically about like success and like wins, and not necessarily asking people to like re-traumatize themselves over and over again. Because I think that that is a trope that queer communities, especially Black trans-centered like narratives and media can fall into, that it becomes so focused on this idea of struggle and like death, and like those are like the dominant images that we see when we think of like Black trans people, especially Black trans women. So my goal and like the goal of Last Call is to uncover the stories that we know already exist that center joy, the stories of success, of survival, yeah, of like love and passion, drama, you know what I mean? Like just life, like drama stuff too. So yeah, that's maybe more than the question, but or the answer to the question, but yeah, it really depends. We also like are encourage our folks to like lean into what feels comfortable to them and what feels comfortable to the interviewee. I feel like I work primarily in people's homes, which is also why we had to take a major pause during COVID, because not only are we mostly working with elders, we also prefer to come into people's homes because one, sound is like usually quieter in people's houses, usually sometimes depending on what your home like is. And people are generally more comfortable in their home space rather than coming to like a sterile studio or like, or if you're meeting in a coffee shop, which we did and have at some points if we have to, you get to hear all the sounds in the background, all the birds and the people and the waiters and the clinkings of the things. So yeah, being in home space feels really important to our practice and unique to our practice as people allow for it. And yeah, and then like also sharing identities with the people that you interview. We also found that really quickly, figured that out kind of quick, that some of my like white counterparts who started Last Call, when they were doing the Dyke Bar project, they yeah, they ended up with a lot of interviews from white lesbians. And New Orleans is a predominantly Black city, has always been a predominantly Black city. So that struck them as strange, you know? And they found that when they would reach out to some of the Black elders, they would be a little hesitant and unsure. They're just like, who are these white girls like asking us about lesbian bars and calling it dyke bars? And like, those are the gay bars, you know what I mean? So there's like cultural differences and cues that people were missing or just like didn't understand necessarily. And so there's always been an intentionality around like bringing in different folks to this work. It's actually part of how I got roped into Last Call stuff, is because they were at a point where they're like, oh, we really can't continue doing this work without having more Black and Brown representation at the core and at the center. Um, and yeah, and part of how Natalie got it is because we were like, oh, we really can't keep doing this work if we don't have more like Black trans femme and like local like to Louisiana representation like in the center. So that's what I mean. Like as we continue to like shift through leadership, I'm really hoping like we're intentional about like who we're passing this on to. And we're trying to keep it as centralized as possible. So again, long,
No,
maybe.
that's great. These questions are just to get you going to speak about things, because I know some students will be watching this later as well, who weren't able to be here during the like live time. So I'm also trying to ask questions to kind of speak to some things I know they're curious about. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to kind of how you kind of learned some of these skills with the podcasting and the interviewing. To what degree was there trial and error? To what degree was there kind of formalized training or looking at other oral history projects? To what, have things kind of shifted? I know that now you're doing a lot of kind of trainings, and I'm also wondering if you can speak to how you teach doing oral histories. I know that's a big question. There's like kind of like three parts to that, but take it as you want to.
Yeah, so definitely lots of trial and error, especially like earlier on. And yeah, and then I think at some point, like we knew we needed, support. And so we figured out how to wrote a little grant, you know what I mean? And was able to pay some folks to help, train us. So Wendy Gowden, who's a professor down at Xavier University, who's like a queer Black lesbian woman, not to spill her tea, but yeah, Wendy's amazing. And she's been like integral to like both like training us. Like she was actually the person who did the first oral history workshop. We paid her to facilitate that. And then after that first round, me and Natalie have been working with Wendy to like consulting with her. She's kind of been like our advisor and our coach, and meeting with us and going over the curriculum that we've built out together. And then also now, I think I should also mention that Natalie is a historian. Like that's part of what she studied in undergrad. So, the beauty of this being a collective too is that people lean into their strengths. At one point, a major person in our collective was Free for All, who's amazing like musician, composer, and also like that's who has trained us in audio editing, and has like created this like really awesome, cute. I might have one like right here. Where is it? No. But they made like a zine for their workshop, where like how to make a podcast 101, and like takes people through Hindenburg is the um software that they have trained us on. And yeah, and have gotten us to a point where I feel comfortable teaching other people the basics, letting people know that like I am no audio editing expert. I'm a theater maker, performer person. That's where I feel like my most comfortable. And I think, but that's also the beauty of this work too, is that like people have been able to like learn new skills and flex in new ways. There's a lot of like firsts that happens here at Last Call, even down to like our set designer for like our first rendition of Alleged Lesbian Activities. It was like the first time she'd ever made a set thing. Like she like knew how to build things, but hadn't, and it's like a playwright actually. And somehow was convinced us that she could do it. And we're like, yeah, you could totally do it. And we trust the people and like give them the support that they need to like, you know, live their wildest dreams and like try something new. So trial and error definitely has been integral to how we've built up our process, and then also leaning into like community experts that we've identified. So like the Wendy Gowdens and the Free for Alls, and having them, being able to pay them to like train us formally, to like advise us. And yeah, and like identifying where we have like weak points and being like, okay, well, this is a place where we need to ask somebody to to come in and do a thing. That's been so important. But yeah, the oral history itself, again, I feel like and how we train people in oral history, and like so much again comes in doing the thing. So like we have like in our intensives, we have a whole curriculum that we go through and like talk to people about like, you know, both like the technical aspects of how do you use your recorder, and the more like, you know, heady aspects of like, why are we actually doing this work, and like rooting it back to like the community building, and like and rooting it back to like deepening the relationships and stuff, and building out the questions together as a collective, so that we have like similar, you know, themes coming throughout and stuff. Yeah, it's been helpful having someone who feels really excited to talk about all the theory and stuff. That's someone being my counterpart, Natalie, because I feel like she's been able to like shine in this moment. And yeah, in ways that like I'll be able to shine in our creative intensive that, you know, she won't, just mostly because of like what our training is in. And yeah, and it's also like yeah, it feels like this thing that we're trying to like, I don't know, like I don't think that oral history or any of the stuff that we do is like it feels like a thing that everyday people can do, you know? Like that feels really important to like remember that like, you know, you don't necessarily need to get a formalized degree in history or whatever to like do an oral history project or to like interview people. Like this project has encouraged me in so many ways to just like continue using interviews in my life, like not just for creative things, but like taking it to my personal family and stuff as like a way, because people transition and people get older and like and new ones come in, and I want them to be able to hear the same stories that I heard growing up. And these feel like, and you know, I'm a millennial, so like all my older family, and also we're from the country, low key, so we don't have like a lot of like videos of like the past and stuff. We have some photos, but like not that many, and not a lot of videos. So this feels like a way that, you know, I can, yeah, just keep building with my family even in this really beautiful way. So yeah,
Thank you so much for those
like if
wisdom.
anything, I'm like if anyone takes anything from this, like know that you can do oral history. If I can do it, you can also be an oral historian. And there's so many projects and so many um yeah, like folks out there who are doing this work and who are down to talk and stuff, you know, including us.
That's great. And I hope that empowers a lot of folks listening to this. Sarah, do you have any questions?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really glad you asked about oral history and like the more formal side. So I won't touch on that because the answer was amazing. Thank you, Indy. My question is a little bit more about like participatory projects. I was so inspired and interested with like the ways in which Last Call has been built, like in a responsive way to the community, how you like adapted it to be more about like joy and like incorporate that as well. So I was just wondering if you had advice about like how to build connection and not be extractive and like help people feel like they have ownership over their narratives. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, the first thing is you can literally write it into your release forms. Like usually people have some sort of form that you sign, and that's in our forms. So like legally speaking, it's on paper that like both Last Call owns the oral history, and whoever the oral history, like the interviewee is, like they own that as well, and that we won't do the thing. So that's step one. It's like you can just put it in your paperwork. And explain to the people that yeah, that they have ownership, and that yeah. And for us, it's like the check-in process, you know, every time there's something new, we're like, well, let's send it to that person to make sure that they know that it's okay. And it varies. Like sometimes people are like really into it. Like again, Mary and Alder, like some of our biggest supporters, and I feel like I always have to shout them out because they have feedback, honey. They have all the feedback. And some of it is like, I mean, all of it's amazing and great. And some of it we can do and some of it we can't. But like, you know, if they can't hear the things, I'm like, actually, that's really important. Let's adjust levels because we want them to be able to hear things and stuff. So having check-in points with folks feels important. Like as you're like doing the stuff, I think, yeah, like events for people to meet each other. is like a way to like help foster more community and for things to like not feel as extractive. I think there's always this like debate of like to pay people, to not pay people. Um, like, I don't know. And we've leaned into not paying people because we want people to like show up because they want to give their story and not show up because they need to make a quick check or something. And then we figure out different ways to compensate or like support our folks or whatever. So like we are working towards building an emergency fund for our interviewees is like a dream and a goal. And yeah, we usually show up with like a little love offering, a little gift or something. Like I know she likes red wine. I'm gonna bring a nice little bottle of wine and a flower, some flowers or something, just like tokens of appreciation, I think can go a really long way. Yeah, and I think, yeah, finding different community, like if you're going into a different place, what helped me in Boston was like having other community partners who can like help vouch for you in ways. Um, so like I met like our primary like interviewees through like someone who was already connected through the presenter, the theater offensive. And if it hadn't been for that person, then who knows like what we wouldn't have gotten. So yeah, so community partners feel really important, and like, yeah, and trying to touch base with people like beyond just that one interview. So even before the interview, having like phone call conversations or something, or coffee or something to tell people about the things, and then like after the interview. So part of why in our creative fellowship right now we like are trying to have quarterly events is like not just for our like larger community to meet our fellows, but it's also for like our fellows and for our interviewees to be in community with each other, beyond just like that one time you interviewed me. Like the more you can see people and talk to people um, and talk to people not just about whatever your project is, but just like about life. I think the richer the work is, and and I think the last thing is like making sure that people are there. Like I think part of what's hooked me into this work as well is like just being able to like witness other people witness their story. So my role in alleged lesbian activities was I was the bartender, Frankie. And so that meant that I was kind of just like on stage a lot at the bar, whether I was like actually speaking or doing a thing. I was kind of, and it was a great way for me to be able to see people like in the actual audience, and it's interesting how different people react in different ways. Like some people get really excited and people cry, people clam up and shrink and like get really embarrassed. Yeah, but either way, there's just like so much pride that comes out of it, of just being recognized in that way, to think, wow, my story is that important that it can be in some play that these like people are making. So that process feels just, I don't know, the more I can create that type of space for people, the better. Yeah, the more I can create like spaces where people can like see a reflection of themselves, the better. I think that's what's been coming out of this for me too. It's like having folks, both young and old, like come up to me afterwards, after the show or after whatever the thing is, be like, wow, like I saw myself in ways that like I've never seen myself in this kind of like a theater thing. And that felt really special and feels like something that I'm continuing to strive for in this role, for like people who don't normally see themselves reflected on stage, to like see themselves reflected in like good lights, fun lights.
For the stage production, because you mentioned that originally Alleged Lesbian Activities was supposed to have like a larger tour and then the pandemic happened. But you kind of hinted that maybe there might be future shows, but with a new cast because people's life have been changing. Do you want to speak more to that, or is it still up in the air a bit?
I mean, it's still very much so up in the air. Like I said, like I think it's beautiful how much people's lives have changed. And again, because it was an ensemble built piece, we just have these questions about like, can these same people still play these same roles?
Mm.
like folks, some people have children, some people have transitioned into whole new genders and names and physicalities in their bodies and stuff. So yeah, and I think that it's fine. Like I think that, I mean, not that it's, I think that's beautiful that people are living these lives as expansively as they can. And yeah, and we're trying to figure out how, I'm like, what's the best way to like land the plane and to like kind of like put the bow on it, because it definitely feels like, you know, we didn't get to have some sort of like closure with that project. But it's still very much so early in process. Like we've had a meeting.
Okay. Okay.
A
Nice.
meeting. But it's, yeah, but there's, I'm hoping for something more. And we're definitely, and we're also still in the process of writing a book, actually, of turning some
Wow.
mysteries into a book. That's been like a slow chug-a-lug through the pandemic as well. Um, but yeah, that's gonna happen at some point as well.
Awesome. I didn't know about the book project until you just mentioned it. I knew about the other ones, but that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Um, do you have a sense for what people can look forward to in terms of how the book will be shaped? In terms of, I mean, book shaped, but I mean, like in terms of like how will it be the parts of the interviews themselves, or will it be kind of talking about the process, or?
Yeah, we kind of want to do a little bit of both. It felt important to us to, because again, not every story could make it into the show and stuff. And not every story can make it onto the podcast even. Um, so it felt important to like find different stories that we hadn't incorporated in those ways to feature. So there'll be some excerpts from interviews, like longer excerpts, if not full length interviews. I don't think we're gonna do full things. We're editing them down to shorten them a little bit. And then there's been talk. We're still in the creative process, but we definitely want to have some like more like reflective essays about like the creation process and what it meant to like do these things from some of the core folks who made it. And then there's also like small dreams of like ways to incorporate like visual art into it, whether it's like, yeah, whether like having portraits for folks that like, or maybe even like, I don't know, like a graphic novel style situation. So, but we know it's gonna be like yeah, it's not just gonna be interviews. There'll be a little essay in there and some sort of art, like or different art in there. Yeah.
Amazing. I love how much your project brings people in so many different ways and lets people connect with these histories in so many different forms. I think that's so wonderful and helps make your work really accessible to a lot of different communities. Again, I invite the people in attendance, if you want to write in a question. It's okay if you're feeling shy and you don't want to, but please make use of the Q&A box if you wish to. I was wondering too, in terms of performances, you talked a little bit, you kind of hinted at the beginning that you might be interested in talking a bit about your theater work as well with the youth theater work. And I'm wondering if you kind of see connections between the two projects and how the two projects kind of inform each other.
Yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. I mean, like, I think the biggest connection is just in the community that's being centered, for sure. And actually, Loud's in this interesting place. So we've been really investing time and energy in developing our next generation of like young folks who will take the program off. So we've been talking about succession. I'm leaving Loud at some point soon in the next couple of years. So trying to figure out like who and how do you pass the program on to people. Yeah, because yeah, and ways that feels like responsible and like that people have the support that they need to succeed, and not just like dumping something and being like, "Now figure it out." And that's always been kind of like a core thing for Loud. And so yeah, one of the ways that we're evaluating. We're actually, Loud is in its 10th year anniversary right now. And one of the ways that we want to evaluate our 10 years is by doing some oral histories and possibly doing a little video project. And that's a connection that's happening because I'm sure Last Call will have a big part in helping to train our current young folks and doing the oral histories um, for Loud and stuff. And so, yeah, so that's been a connection. Although I don't know how much like creative stuff we're gonna do out of it. I think, yeah, the other big connection too, I guess like we're both Last Call and Loud are in this like development phase. I think the creative fellowship very much so mirrors kind of the work that we've been doing with this group of youth staff members for the past couple of years, the big experiment, as we've been calling it, where we've been just training them and trying to give them different opportunities, both like facilitation training and like theater training and yeah, and like, and also like real-time experience, like of like now you guys get to like run an ensemble and see how that's like and stuff. Giving them training on like marketing and outreach stuff. And it's been a lot and it's been super fruitful and exciting to like see people like grow and step into their power. It's been, yeah, working with young people is just like, it's so interesting. It's a totally different world. Just totally different world, but also exciting and fun. Definitely one of the hardest jobs I've ever had in my life is working with some of these young people. And also like the most fruitful job that I've had in my life, minus Last Call. Like it's kind of amazing that this gets to be my job. I get to make art with my homies and I meet a lot of like really awesome people along the way.
That's such a wonderful note to maybe end on because it's so positive. I mean, this whole talk has been so fantastic. Was there anything else you want to say? We didn't have any other questions from attendees, but anything else you want to leave us on, or are you?
I'm just super grateful to be here, super excited for a platform and to be reconnected.
Well, thank you so much, Indee, for being here. This was fantastic. I know a bunch of my students are going to be really excited to watch also later who couldn't be here. Oh, wait, we have a Q&A. Yeah, and one of our participants has said how wonderful the talk was and thanked you. Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Indee, for being here. Thank you, Sarah, for helping with the tech. Thank you to our amazing captioner for tonight and for everyone who's watching this after the fact. Also, please check out our website for videos of past recordings, as well as please join us for our upcoming future events. So thank you all so much for being here. Have a great night.